This is part 2 of the video series describing how I make a Paschal candle stand for a church out in California. And in the first part of the series I talked about how I carved the candle stand, and now I'm going to talk about how I make the base and attach it to the stand. This is the base. I've glued it up out of pieces of red oak. It's a lamination of 11 pieces of red oak, and they're glued together and right now clamped using a glue called Unibond 800, which is a very stiff glue, and it prevents the pieces from creeping, or that is growing independently of each other. I'm going to just break a little piece of glue that I had left over, and you can see just how stiff this stuff really is, and it will hold these laminations together nice and firmly, and they'll always be flat along the face. With the laminations all glued up, I've been smoothing the top and the bottom of the base and thicknessing it to the right thickness using my thickness planer. Earplugs in. Dust collection on. The base correctly, and now I'm going to cut about a 2.5 degree bevel on each of the 4 sides to match the taper of the vertical stand that we carved in the last session. I'm using my sliding compound miter saw with dust collection. Earplugs are already in, dust collection on, and let's start cutting. Now I'm rounding over the edges of the base, the top edges of the base. I've already done the sides. I started on the top edge here. I'm using my router with a 1/2 inch round over bit with good dust collection on it. Turn on the vacuum cleaner. I finished rounding over the edges of the base, and then I rough sanded with 220 grit sandpaper to make sure there was not any blemishes that had to be corrected. Then I went ahead and marked where the base and the vertical section will meet. It's hard to see that line, but there's an outline there. I flipped the base over and marked for 4 screw holes. Now I've drilled one of them here so you can see what this is. This is a countersunk hole, countersink hole with a 3/8 inch bit. It goes down basically so the screw head will be about here on the base, and then I'll finish the hole with a 3/16 inch bit, so it'll come all the way through, and then I can mark those holes on the vertical section. And there you go. We've got all the holes drilled all the way through, countersunk, and we're ready to go ahead and line this up on the vertical section and mark those holes. I've taken the vertical section of the candle stand and turned it upside down and clamped it onto my bench. Here's the front of the stand on this side. I've taken the base, and using that outline I told you about earlier that I had made of where the intersection is, I went ahead and clamped on a couple of battens so that all I have to do now is line up those battens like that, take my center punching, I've got a set of these center punches in all different diameters, and just go ahead and tap a little mark for each one. And now I've got some marks here that I will use to line up the holes. Okay, I've finished drilling the pilot holes into the vertical section, the tower, using my antique plug-in electric drill. Here's the screw that's going to go in. And so I'll just go ahead and line up for a dry fit my base, and go ahead and put the screw in the hole and see if everything seems to line up okay. Here you can see the tower attached to the base. It seems like it lined up just fine. I've still, of course, got to do some finishing, but I'm going to go ahead and sand the base and sand the tower, get that all finished. But I will come back later, show you a little bit about the finishing process, and also how we plug those holes for the countersink on the bottom. I've sanded the candle stand and the base to P600 grit, which is very, very fine, so they're nice and smooth. And now I'm going to apply the first coat of shellac polish. You may recall from the last video on carving, I talked about shellac polish. It's very thin solution of shellac flakes and denatured alcohol. And I apply it with a piece of cloth folded up. I wring it out, and I simply apply it like this, nice and thin, all over. And it'll take 20 minutes or so to dry, and after it dries, I'll go ahead and I'll sand it with P600, and I'll do that about 5 or 6 times until the surface is just a very nice smooth surface. I've screwed the base onto the tower. Of course, finishing is done now. And now I'm going to plug the holes for the screws. And before I do that, I had already put my brand and the date on here using a branding iron. My signature is unreadable, so I'm told, so I use a branding iron. And now I'm going to plug the screw holes. Very simple process. I use a plug cutter that makes a tapered plug. Okay, you just make that in a piece of the base wood, not this piece of wood, but one like it. And then you just take a little bit of glue, put it on the end of a screwdriver or something that you can just rub a little bit inside the hole. Put the plug in, try to make sure the grain is lined up with the plug and the base, and just go ahead and tap the plug home. You don't have to go flush, because later on you're going to come back with a flush cutting saw and then a chisel or a plane to make it perfectly smooth. Okay, now we're going to attach the brass socket that the Paschal candle will fit into. This is a 2-inch diameter socket. It's got a 5/16 inch threaded hole on the bottom. And I have here a hanger bolt. That's a bolt with wood threads on one end, like a screw. And on the other end is a 5/16 inch bolt that I've got 2 nuts attached to right now. I can drill a hole into the top of the candle stand, put the hanger bolts in, and then screw the socket onto the hanger bolt and put a lock nut on the inside to hold it firmly. I'm using a 1/4 inch drill. This is a brad point drill, makes a nice hole. Try to make sure that my hole is nice and perpendicular here. Using a 1/2 inch wrench, I'll then just go ahead and install the hanger bolt. I'll just screw the socket on. And put my locking nut on. And there we are. She's all done. Pretty nice.